Have you ever looked around and wondered, why don't I fit in? Why does silence feel more like home than the noise of the crowd? Could it be that you were never meant to blend in, but to stand apart? What if your isolation isn't a curse, but a calling? A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts, so he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. These words from Alan Watts aren't just musings on overthinking, they are a warning to the chosen ones. For when a man begins to awaken, when he truly begins to see, he also begins to lose. And the first thing he loses is his crowd. To walk the path of truth, young man, you must be ready to walk alone. Alan Watts understood something most never will, that the deeper you go into yourself, the more distant you become from others. Not because you hate them, not because you reject love, but because reality becomes too clear to pretend. Watts saw that most friendships are built on illusions, shared delusions, mutual distractions. But when your mind awakens, you stop playing the game. And those who still live by it will call you distant, strange, even arrogant. But it is not arrogance, it is ascension. As Watts put it, you didn't come into this world, you came out of it, like a wave from the ocean. You are not here to fit in. You are here to remember that you are not separate from existence. And when you start to live like you are part of the infinite, not the trivial, you begin to lose touch with those who only know the finite. They talk of trends. You speak of eternity. They seek approval. You seek truth. They chase happiness. You create meaning. The chosen ones have zero friends, not because they can't connect, but because they refuse to dilute. They would rather sit in silence than shout in noise. They would rather walk alone toward greatness than be surrounded on the path to nowhere. Jean-Paul Sartre, another philosopher of modern solitude, declared, "If you're lonely when you're alone, you're in bad company." That is a test. When you sit by yourself, truly by yourself, are you disturbed? Are you restless? Then you have not yet met the real you, because the chosen do not fear solitude. They feed on it. You see, most people are not looking for you. They are looking for a version of you that comforts them, that amuses them, that reflects them. When you stop performing that version, when you start speaking with depth and walking with purpose, you will find the room slowly emptying. And that is the beginning. Carl Jung, who deeply influenced Watts, wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But there is a price. That privilege comes with isolation, because the more you become yourself, the less you fit the mold that others have designed for you. You are not breaking their hearts. You are breaking their illusions." Young man, imagine this. You wake up tomorrow and stop pretending. You stop nodding at things you don't agree with. You stop showing up where you don't belong. You stop speaking when silence is more honest. What do you think would happen? Most of your circle would vanish. And that would be a blessing. Because in that moment, you would meet the first person who truly matters, yourself. Not the you who tries to be liked, not the you who is always adjusting, but the still one, the deep one, the one who looks into the mirror and sees not a face but a force. Watts said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." But to be truly alive in this world is rare. Most people are not living, they are rehearsing. And those who choose life over illusion become a threat. Not because they attack the world, but because they expose it. And the world hates to be seen. That is why the chosen walk alone. Plato told us long ago, no one is more hated than he who speaks the truth. That hate isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes as quiet rejection. Invitations stop arriving. Friends stop calling. Eyes no longer meet yours. It is not your fault. It is your light. It burns illusions. And illusions are comfortable things to most. So to the young man listening to this, when your phone grows silent, when your schedule clears, when the noise fades, do not panic. That is not loneliness. That is the beginning of clarity. That is the beginning of power. You are not being abandoned. You are being forged. Do not chase the ones who left. Do not dim to fit in. Instead, sharpen. Discipline, read, build. Watch what happens. So remember Watt's words again and again. You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. Let the old you die. Let the false friendships fade. Let the silence settle. And in that silence, a king is born. There's a reason why silence terrifies most people. It reveals. And the chosen ones are those who are no longer afraid of what the silence reveals within them. As Alan Watts suggested through his many talks and reflections, the journey inward is not a comfortable path. It is a spiral descending through the layers of illusion until you meet the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. And once you touch that place, once you see yourself clearly, you can never unsee it. And those around you can never relate to you the same way again. That is the real reason the chosen walk alone. As Friedrich Nietzsche said, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. The tribe offers comfort, but at a cost. Your soul, your thoughts must match theirs. Your aspirations must not outgrow their ceilings. Your silence must never be too deep, or it will threaten their noise. So when you, a young man stepping into his potential, begin to read more than you scroll, begin to train while others sleep, begin to meditate while others party, you are not just changing habits, you are changing frequency. And on that higher frequency, very few signals come through. That's why the silence grows. Alan Watts often smiled at the irony of this path. He said, trying to get away from yourself is the cause of suffering. But most people you know are doing exactly that, escaping themselves through distraction, through crowds, through noise. But the chosen turn inward, not away. And when they do, something remarkable happens. They discover that the deeper they go, the less they need. That is why their phone doesn't buzz. That is why the room clears when they speak the truth. That is why they sit in cafes alone, reading old books while others gossip over empty words. And that is where their power begins. Michel Foucault, one of the great postmodern minds, warned us, where there is power, there is resistance. When you become powerful, not in volume, not in status, but in presence, you will be resisted, not because you've harmed anyone, but because your very existence reminds others of what they've avoided. Your self-discipline offends their laziness. Your silence threatens their comfort. Your focus shames their chaos. And so, you lose friends, but you gain yourself. Let me speak to you again, young man. Think about your life. Think about those moments when you chose not to drink at the party, when you left early to go train, when you said no to gossip, when you spoke about your goals and were met with rolled eyes or fake smiles. What happened after that? You drifted away. They stopped inviting you. That's not rejection. That's proof. Proof that you're no longer one of the many. You are becoming one of the few. And the few must walk alone before they walk among equals. Seneca, the Stoic master, wrote, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. The chosen live by this principle. They are not stagnant. They are always evolving. But evolution is a lonely process. When you're shedding your skin, you don't belong in crowded rooms. When you're building a mind that can see through lies, small talk becomes unbearable. So instead, you spend more time in solitude. Not isolation. There's a difference. Isolation is when you run from the world because you're afraid. Solitude is when you stand apart from the world because you are mastering yourself. And in that solitude, something begins to take shape. Vision, clarity, fire. That fire will burn down every weak relationship in your life. Let it burn. Alan Watts reminded us, the more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless. Friendships built on convenience are not permanent. They are seasonal. And if you want to live a life of depth, you must prune the dead branches from your tree. That includes people. Because to grow higher, you must grow lighter. Jiddu Krishnamurti, another spiritual rebel who walked the edges of philosophy, once said, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And this world is not built for the chosen. It is built for the compliant, the entertained, the addicted. So when you start rejecting the poison, the world calls you mad. When you start mastering your morning, your mind, your mission, the world whispers that you've changed. Yes, you've changed. That's the point. You're not here to be understood by those who refuse to understand themselves. You are here to build something so rare that the world has no name for it yet. That kind of creation requires silence. It requires distance. It requires walking away from everything that doesn't echo your future. And yes, that means walking alone. But never confuse solitude with sadness. The chosen know this. Silence is a weapon, loneliness is a furnace, and isolation is initiation. Let the silence break you, then let it shape you. And once the silence has shaped you, hardened your will, deepened your sight, it becomes your shield. You stop needing noise to prove you exist. You no longer chase after those who don't understand your mission, because by then, something ancient has awakened within you. The chosen are not just men with goals, they are men with presence. And presence is forged in fire, alone. Alan Watts once whispered into the void, "Man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun." And this is one of the deepest lessons for the chosen ones. You begin to suffer less not because life becomes easier, but because you stop attaching your soul to things that have no weight. Opinions, likes, rejections, friendships based on mutual boredom. When you stop taking those seriously, you start to become untouchable. This untouchability, this divine detachment, is what Marcus Aurelius called being like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it. You are no longer moved by trends or tears. You are no longer drawn to where the crowds gather, because you know the crowd never builds empires. The crowd never finds truth. The crowd never reaches the peak. Only the few do, the chosen, and they never arrive in groups. To the young man listening now, listen closely. There will come a moment in your life where you'll sit in a room and feel that deep, echoing emptiness. No one to call. No one who gets it. That feeling, that's not failure. That's not depression. That's the threshold. It is the rite of passage. You're no longer one of them, but you haven't fully become you. Stay there. Sit in that fire, because what's coming out of that furnace is not the boy who once wanted to be liked. It is the man who no longer cares. That man will lead. That man will command silence when he enters a room. That man will not ask for permission. He will simply become. Remember Nietzsche's brutal truth. He who cannot obey himself will be commanded. That is the difference between the chosen and the common. The common look for leaders. The chosen lead themselves. But self-leadership begins in isolation, because you can't lead others until you've ruled over your own chaos. So what do you do in the silence? You train, you read, you create, you refine. You wake up earlier not because it's trendy, but because the world is quieter when the sun hasn't risen yet. You eat clean, not because someone told you to, but because your body's a temple, not a trash bin. You say no to distractions because every moment stolen by nonsense is a betrayal of your own legacy. That's why you don't have many friends, because they are still living in stolen moments, and you are collecting every second like gold. Slavoj Žižek, a chaotic mind of postmodern thought, once said, "The more choices we have, the more meaningless each one becomes." That's modern society. Endless connections, but none that go deep. Endless friends, but none that stand tall beside you when the storm comes. So you, being chosen, go against it. You cut away options, you simplify, you sharpen, you say, "I don't need more, I need real." That's power. And real friendship? That may only come once or twice in a lifetime for the chosen. But it will come. Not when you are chasing people, but when you are chasing purpose. The rare are drawn to the rare. Not through words, but through vibration. Like magnets recognizing each other in the dark. Until then, you walk alone. And you walk like you were born to do it. Because deep down, you were. The ancients knew this. Pythagoras, the silent mystic of Greece, believed that silence is better than unmeaning words. That's why the chosen don't speak often. When they do, it lands. It cuts through noise like thunder. Because it isn't just sound, it's signal. Every day, young man, ask yourself, what am I building when no one is watching? Who am I when the crowd isn't cheering? That is the measure of a chosen one. And if today your phone is quiet, your evenings are long, your path is lonely, good. That's the ground where gods are forged. That's the silence where destiny speaks. Alan Watts once asked, what would you do if money were no object? But maybe the deeper question is, what would you do if approval were no object? Would you still speak truth? Would you still build your empire? Would you still walk alone? Because the chosen ones already know the answer. You're chosen not because the world said so, but because you answered a call no one else could hear. And that call came in the quietest hour when you were most alone. That's when it begins. Not in applause, not in praise, but in that solitary moment where something inside you whispered, more is possible. And the moment you accepted that, everything changed. You saw through the illusions. You started to question why the loudest people seemed the most lost, why the most crowded rooms were filled with the most empty souls, why success looked so different from the inside than it did from the outside. And as you kept asking those questions, you kept losing company. But you gained clarity. Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst, said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That privilege, it costs. It costs popularity. It costs friendships built on comfort. It costs weekends wasted on nothing. Because to become who you truly are, you must first strip away everything you are not. And that's why the chosen ones have zero friends. Because they are too busy unlearning. Unlearning what they were told to believe. Unlearning who they were told to be. Unlearning how to live a life of quiet desperation, smiling for the camera while dying inside. The chosen see through that. They break the mirror, and in doing so, they break the world's grip on them. Let me bring it closer to your daily life, young man. When you choose to wake up and journal your thoughts instead of scrolling your feed, that's rebellion. When you stay in on a Friday night to work on your business, your body, your mind, that's revolution. When you walk past the dopamine traps, the easy women, the lazy conversations, and you keep your eyes on your vision, that's war. And in every war, the warrior walks alone before the victory parade. Arthur Schopenhauer, often called the philosopher of loneliness, declared, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. And when he is alone, he must face the great trial of all chosen ones, the burden of knowing. Because knowledge isolates, vision isolates, mastery isolates. You begin to see how most people don't want truth. They want distraction. They don't want freedom. They want comfort. And the chosen? They can no longer pretend. That's why conversations dry up, why invitations stop coming, why the phone stays silent. Because when you grow past illusions, you become invisible to those still clinging to them. But hear this, invisibility is not weakness. It is preparation. Because the chosen disappear only to reappear, unrecognizable. They return not to blend in, but to lead. Not to join the party, but to start the fire. And until that day comes, they train. You, young man, are not here to chase people. You're here to chase potential. The right people will orbit your fire when it's lit, but the fire must come first. Let them misunderstand you. Let them walk away. While they chase comfort, you build fire. Because when the world finally sees what you've become, it will be too late for them to catch up. You are not alone. You are chosen. Now act like it.